this video, we're going to talk about the difference between active studying and passive studying. This is one of the most important ideas for preparing for math exams, because many students spend time studying, but not all study time helps in the same way. Sometimes a study method feels comfortable. It feels familiar. It feels like you are getting something done. But when it is time to take the test, that method may not have prepared you to solve problems on your own. That does not mean you did anything wrong on purpose. It just means you may need to shift from passive studying to active studying. Let's start with passive studying. Passive studying is when you are mostly taking information in. For example, you reread your notes. You watch a video. You look over examples. You highlight formulas. You read through solutions. You listen to someone else explain a problem. These activities are not bad. In fact, they can be very helpful at the beginning of learning something. The problem is when passive studying is the only thing you do. Here's why. On a math exam, you are not usually asked to recognize a solution that someone else already completed. You are asked to solve a problem yourself. You have to decide where to start, what method to use, what steps to take, and how to check whether your answer makes sense. Passive studying can make something feel familiar, but familiarity is not the same as being able to do it independently. This is why a student might say, "I understood it when the instructor did it," or "it made sense in the video, but then felt lost during the quiz or homework." That experience can be frustrating, but it is also very common. Now, let's compare that to active studying. Active studying is when you are doing something with the information. In math, active studying might look like solving problems without looking at the solution, explaining a process in your own words, redoing a missed homework or quiz problem, making your own practice test or practice quiz, sorting problems by type, writing down the first step for different kinds of problems, teaching a concept to someone else, checking your work and correcting your mistakes, and asking a specific question about where you got stuck. Active studying asks your brain to retrieve information, make decisions, and practice the same kind of thinking you will need on the exam. That is why it's so powerful. It may feel harder at first. Actually, it probably will feel harder, but that is not a bad sign. That is often a sign that your brain is working. Let's look at an example. Let's suppose you are studying how to solve equations. A passive approach might be, I reread the notes on solving equations. I watched 3 videos. I looked at the homework problems again. That might help you remember what solving equations looks like. But an active approach would be, I looked at one example. I then closed my notes and solved 5 equations. I checked my answers. I noticed I kept making mistakes when distributing a negative sign. Then I practiced 3 more problems with negative signs. That second approach gives you much better information. Now you know exactly what to practice. Here's another example. Suppose you are studying word problems. A passive approach might be, I read through the examples in the book. An active approach might be, I covered the solution and tried to identify what the problem was asking. I wrote down the known information. I chose a strategy. I tried the problem. Then I compared my setup to the example. Again, active studying does not mean you never use notes or examples. It means you do not stop there. A good study session often starts passive and then becomes active. For example, you can watch part of a video and then pause and try to solve a problem. You can read one example, then cover it and try a similar one. You can review a formula and then use it in a problem. You can look at a missed quiz question and then redo it from the beginning. You can read your notes and then write a summary without looking. The goal is to move from I recognize this to I can do this. Let's talk about how to turn passive studying into active studying. If you usually reread notes, then after rereading one section, close your notes and write down the main idea in your own words. If you usually watch videos, then pause before the instructor finishes a problem and try the next step yourself. If you usually look at homework solutions, then choose one problem you missed and redo it on a blank sheet of paper. If you usually highlight formulas, then write what each part of the formula means and solve one example using it. If you usually review examples, then create a new problem that looks similar and try it without help. These small changes can make a big difference. Now, active studying does not mean you should never ask for help. In fact, asking for help is a very active study strategy when you come prepared. Instead of saying, I do not understand anything, you might say, I tried this problem and I got stuck after this step. I think I used the wrong formula, but I'm not sure why. I understand the example, but I cannot tell when to use this method. I keep making mistakes with signs. Can we look at another one? Those are great questions. They show that you are engaging with the material. Before we finish, I want to give you a simple active study routine. First, pick one topic. Then, review one example. Close your notes. Try 3 problems without referencing any material. Then, check your work. Circle the step where you got stuck. Then, write down one question or one thing to practice next. This is active studying. And remember, active studying can be tiring. It is normal for your brain to feel like it is working hard. That does not mean you are failing. It means you are practicing. You do not need to study perfectly. You just need to make your study time more active, one step at a time. So here is your action step for the week. Choose one study habit you already use and make it more active. If you watch videos, pause and practice. If you read notes, close them and summarize. If you review homework, redo any missed problems. If you memorize formulas, use them in examples. Passive studying helps you become familiar with math. Active studying helps you become ready to do math. Both have a place, but active studying is what builds confidence for exams. Start small. Try one problem. Check your work, learn from it, then try another. That is how progress happens. You can do this.